Hey guys, it's me Jacob, and this video is the 11th video in my Studying JavaScript series. So today I got about 6 hours of study done. It was very successful, I would say. Read through a lot of source code, uh, teased some new documentation, um, took some, inspected a couple things that I had seen a bunch of times a little deeper. Definitely took a deeper look at web APIs. And kind of like did a bunch of thinking today. I'm constantly trying to figure out what I'm actually doing and what I'm actually aiming for and how I'm going to even achieve it and what it takes to achieve it and what are all the correct decisions and moves to make to achieve it. Now, obviously, my goal is to basically become the best programmer I can be, and for me, that seems like a multifaceted thing. One thing is having the deepest comprehension I can of the technology I use and the patterns that exist within it. Programming, coding, deploying code, monitoring it, understanding memory usage, understanding the math. There's a lot of math that's involved with optimizing the entire process, right? And that comes to the second thing. My other goal is largely I don't want to just comprehend things the best I possibly can and, push that to the limit. I also want to leverage it. I want to actually be the most efficient web developer I can be. Now, this is a pretty complicated question, actually. You have to have a pretty deep understanding of what a web developer even does, how you're going to do it, and where the pain points, optimization opportunities exist within it, right? And so, after that point, you need to actually come up with a strategy that might solve it. Good luck measuring it, too, because that's just going to be a lot more work to actually track that you're actually improving. So, I'm not actually going to go into any sort of pain. I'm not going to go into that level of detail, but that's where my head's at, right? Like I'm thinking like, all right, so I'm reading all this source code. I'm going to be a CSS master. I'm going to be a JavaScript master. I'm going to know all of the intricacies between React, JavaScript, web APIs, TypeScript, because all these things combine together into this sort of like hot oatmeal that's confusing. It's confusing as fuck until you're really, really familiar with all of the individual things. Like you're really familiar with React, but then also you're really familiar with how they look combined together, right? React doesn't look the same as React with TypeScript, right? It doesn't look the same as React with TypeScript with this particular CSS solution. Are they using just regular CSS and then injecting it with class name inside of JSX div containers? Or are they using styled components library to basically make template strings that are CSS that are merged together with React components? And is it TypeScript or is it just JavaScript? Are they using hooks? Are they using classes? You see, there's like this huge permutation space, and you have to figure out how to comprehend it and recognize it, one, but then two, how to leverage it. What do you need to do? How are you going to build higher quality web services or websites or whatever, higher quality, web programs faster? And then there's the whole element of, you can optimize how you deploy it too. And I've been thinking about this a little bit. It doesn't have as much to do with JavaScript because I think I have a winning strategy in terms of packaging and running the application, in which case it's pretty simple. You use Webpack and you use Create React App, you bundle it together, it's tiny, you put it in a Docker image, you run Nginx with it, Nginx serves the HTML files and JavaScript files over the internet, and you have TLS certs, and you put it on a VM on AWS with the domain name that's routed to it, with the I mean, that's really pretty much it. And then the complex stuff in terms of all the other part of the thing goes into the back end, right? Um, but that's like a really that's like still a huge thing. For the front end, I really have to get my app development, my like real software developer efficiency up. You know, I need to know exactly how to approach CSS problems. I need to know exactly how to approach making components. I need to know exactly how to approach managing state and, authentication and routes within an entire web app, and how to do it with a WebSocket as well as like HTTP. So I'm trying to juggle a lot of this stuff, and I don't know the right answer, right? I'm a noob. I'm not good enough at this stuff. Um, but I'm having fun reading a bunch of permutations other people have put out there on the open web. Some of them are really high quality things, I'm pretty sure. Grafana, Portainer, I mean, just like the people that make this stuff probably are way ahead of me and are not dummies. And if I pull a little bit from each one of these people and combine it together, I might just be able to become the like super organism I'm aiming to be. So, um, yeah, I mean, it's gonna be a grind. I, expect that I'm probably gonna have to be doing this a lot longer than 30 days, but I'm okay with that. And I'm gonna be getting back to Python eventually too. Python is the motherland. I love that language, and I love using it, and it's so easy. Um, but JavaScript is now my motherland too. It's gonna be right there next to it, and I'm gonna pop out. I'm gonna try and push the limit to like what is possible, the highest quality, the most efficient development cycles, speeds, the most efficient deployments, making it where the application is actually sophisticated enough. Like, what does that mean? What does application sophistication mean? Well, there's a lot of things you want in an application. There's things like being able to store arbitrary data, being able to authenticate people, being able to basically do real-time WebSocket type connections or just HTTP, being able to have it be secure with HTTPS, being able to have the application scale, right? Like if there's more users, how does it store its data? Does it only store it in something like S3? Does it store it in a database too? Is the database NoSQL? Is it SQL? Like those are what make an application actually like powerful, right? And that's what I mean by sophistication. You need to have that, but at the end of the day, it's like it's only part of the entire thing, right? I mean, it's mostly the back end part of it. But and then there's these other questions like cost, and cost in terms of money, dollars, time, complexity. Ultimately, if you're trying to be the most efficient web developer you can be, you're trying to increase the things that make your web development better, and you're trying to decrease the things that block or are obstacles or slow down the entire web development process. And the entire web development process is from beginning to end having having functionality that exists on the internet for users, and that's the entire pipeline. So I'll have to think about that a lot. Because I'm an individual doing all of this stuff, I think I need to have better math at some of these places. The advantage I have as an individual is I don't have to communicate with others. I don't have to cooperate with others. which ultimately I think is inferior. I think that working together is much better. It's impossible for an individual to ever accomplish as much as as a team does. That said, it is still, there are trade-offs, right? And having a team actually be cohesive and actually work together and not just like move in different directions, mess things up, um, is a challenge in and of itself. But I'm pro team for sure. I just recognize it's a complex thing that you have to probably try and do the right way. So anyways, those are all questions that I'm thinking about. That's kind of where my head's at to some extent. Beyond, so that's more like I'm looking out and I'm looking at the forest, right? And I do that for a little bit with my mind because I'm like, I'm going to have to go out into the forest. But then I go back after doing that for a while and I pick up my magnifying glass and I look at the like moss on the ground again. And in this case, the moss is all of these intricate technologies and systems that work together to basically allow you to produce these systems. And those technologies are very numerous in terms of the web stack. You know, we're talking Docker, Nginx, JavaScript, React, TypeScript, Webpack, Babel, CSS, HTML, web APIs, browsers, V8, you know, stuff I mention a whole lot of the time. You know, it's one thing to be able to list off a bunch of huge concepts. It's a whole nother thing to know a bunch of facts about each one of those. And it's an even further thing to know how those things all relate to each other in terms of how are they working together, or how are they dependent and independent and codependent, and like, you know, there's these special parts in JavaScript libraries or code or projects. There's these special pockets where you can see JavaScript, you can see React, you can see TypeScript, you can see a web API, you can see HTML, you can see CSS, and then you might be able to see some other completely unrelated thing like a protocol, like HTTP, right? And it's all just merged together in this one small little cluster. There's so many things, but all of them come together at that point, but they're all also independent. They come together, but they're also independent and stand alone. There's like, so I'm trying to reason about all these things and have it crystallize in my mind more than it has. You know, it's going to come from looking deeper into each one individually, asking the right questions, waiting, just like waiting as your mind figures out more and more the answer to that. And yeah. So that's, I guess, where it's at. I don't know if I'm going to be able to record anything tomorrow because I'm probably planning on going out with my friends for a bit. But I might be able to get like a couple hours. And if I do, I'll try and record something before I head out, you know, and put it up there. On Saturday, I'm definitely going to hit like, I'm going to try and do like, you know, I think like 8 to 10 hours on Saturday. And then Sunday, I'm going to try and do my 12 hours. You know, I'm going to try and really crunch it. And yeah, again, I don't really know. I'm probably just going to keep doing the exercises I'm doing, you know, going through this. I talked about this before, but for CSS, what I do is I just read source code where you see CSS in one way or another. And then the other exercise I do is I read through all of these CSS properties. I think they're called properties. Always forget what they're called. CSS properties, I was correct. So I just look at this giant list of CSS properties that's in alphabetical order on, I think it's w3c.com or whatever. W3 Schools, yeah, that's a pretty good site. It's just reference, right? And I just read through all of them. And I'm just basically slowly memorizing what they are. I'm not even paying attention to what they do. I'm just trying to memorize what they are. And what they do, I think, is going to be pretty obvious once I'm familiar enough with them. You know, so I'm really trying to internalize that at a deeper level. That's for CSS. Then I'm kind of going through web APIs in a similar way because I want to be really familiar. I want to see like, oh, we're doing a window.add event listener. That's common. Oh, we're doing a document.body. We're doing a document get element by ID. These are things. These are just patterns. They're like words. In English, it's like saying the word ostrich. Document.body. It's the same thing. It's like it just means something. You don't need to like. There's actually no way to know what it is without kind of looking it up. You can't infer. I mean, you can, I guess, infer what it is, but who knows how accurate you are, right? You could be totally off. Your guess could be totally off. But yeah, so like looking into the web API things, and then there's the JavaScript patterns, you know. Some of the ones off the top of my head are like object.keys, object.assign. You've got, arrow functions. You've got array.isArray. You've got, the async keyword. You've got promise, where it's like resolve and then reject. And then you have the bluebird promise, where it's got method. And you've got these other interesting things like React, where it's use state, use effect, use context. There's a bunch of them. React router, there's use router, but then there's also, you can use the class React router. Trying to think of some more patterns there. There's some other really key ones, just like React itself, Lodash. Oh, I was going to talk about this with lists in JavaScript or arrays. There's a couple different really common things, idioms that are used with them, like .filter, .map, .foreach, reduce, and you just see this stuff a lot, and it's like you don't want to process that with your mind. You just want to know exactly what it is. You want to be like, okay, filter does this. When you see like .filter, you should just immediately jump in your mind to, let me find the function that's being used as a boolean to pull or deny, like to add or dismiss like items in the array. I explained that terribly, but like maybe an easier one is with like .map, because it's even simpler. It's like when you see .map, all you do is look at the function and you just know that it's just transforming everything that's in the array to an array of this other thing, right? Yeah, then there's the test patterns, man, that are like describe it. I think that's related to like Mocha, and there's like Cypress and Jest or whatever. But there's the importing patterns. Sometimes you see this thing called dynamic, which just wraps around imports. Let me see, I'm probably getting a little bit long here now. Anyways, yeah, I'm pretty much just doing an active recall of stuff here, because this is really useful for instilling it in your mind further. Then there's the TypeScript patterns. This is what makes it so hard. It's like, all I just talked about was JavaScript, but JavaScript exists right next to TypeScript. And when you're a noob, it's like hard to even tell which is which. You're like, oh, this is actually not JavaScript, it's TypeScript. How the fuck does that work? And then eventually you understand that like there's transpiling going on, which means that the file is being stripped of all of these patterns, turned into a JavaScript file. And then there's more transpiling and like furthermore like polyfilling going on, which is basically like taking JavaScript, which is, you can see they've just recursively done this pattern of we'll just add stuff to the file that'll be transformed by a script into something that's compatible with old browsers or modern browsers, both alike. And TypeScript is just part of that now. But it's complicated because one of the hard things is if you have the class react.component, right, and you extend it to make like components, when you see TypeScript, you have react.component bracket props comma state bracket. And I mean it makes sense, I suppose, when you add everything together. But it's definitely less familiar and it's a little bit weird. But you know, this is day 11. You know, by the time I'm on like day 30, I'll probably be like really familiar with these things, and I'll be like, you know. Anyways, so for the sake of time, thanks for listening, guys. Go check out my blog. I'm gonna try and make my blog like way better. It looks okay, but I'm gonna try and make it way better. I'm gonna try and make my writing more effective. I'm gonna try and actually synthesize ideas that are worth reading, right? But that takes time. That takes expertise. Time I theoretically have, expertise I am currently trying to convert from time, trying to get it. So anyways, yeah, go check out that. Like and subscribe on the channel if you want to see me go beyond 4 subscribers and 4 views per video. Anyways, thanks guys, peace, and take care of yourself.